Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 2 discussion. Actually, you know what? Maybe grab 2. This is the video you've been waiting for because this is the big Endgame Overhaul that's coming to Path of Exile 2. A lot of us are expecting to see this in 040, but it looks like we're going to be getting it next week instead. Now, when we say major endgame changes here, we actually do mean them. These are going to be the decoupling of the tower system from the Precursor tablet system. Precursor tablets can now just be applied to any map that you want to apply them to. And on top of that, there's a number of other balance changes that are coming. Now, Jonathan Rogers actually put out a video where he went through everything, but I think that this still from it actually picks up a lot of it. So here you can see that this is a Mire map. This is not one of the maps that is a tower. And down the bottom, you've got the Precursor tablet interface, and one tablet has been slotted into it. Now, you can only use one tablet on maps that have a small number of explicit modifiers on them, but if you've got 6 or more explicit modifiers on them, then you can stick in 3 Precursor tablets. Precursor tablets here have 10 uses remaining, and this one adds irradiated to a map, so it has the guaranteed effect, and then after that, it has its RNG effects as well. In this case, 32% increased gold found in your maps have 88% increased chance to contain shrines. What does this mean? This means you can always overlap 3 Precursor tablets that you want, assuming you're running 6 mod and higher maps, but you can't go further than 3 by any means. In some cases, there's going to be a buff. In other cases, there's going to be a nerf. There's also a number of changes to compensate for the decreases in juicing that are now possible at the very high end, and those will come up later down in this discussion thread, so we'll get to those in a sec. Let's go through some of the other changes, starting with Alchemy Orbs. This is not explicitly about mapping, but honestly, it is about mapping. This is primarily something that's going to impact maps. With the introduction of tiered currency in 030, Alchemy Orbs became both less valuable and less useful. To give them more function and to smooth out the process of crafting your maps, Elks can now be used on magic items. Doing so obliterates the existing modifiers though. So we'll upgrade the magic item into a rare item, replacing the existing modifiers with 4 random modifiers. This is going to be something that on non-premium bases is also quite useful. Let's say that you're just getting yourself into early maps and you've got yourself an amulet base that's quite useful to you, but it's magic and the mods on it were bad. You applied a greater orb of transmutation, a greater orb of augmentation, and you just ended up getting rubbish. Well, at this point, you can then go and hit it with an alchemy orb. You probably still won't get anything good, but at least it's one more chance of getting something good. So that's something that you'll do maybe up to and including the point that you're starting to break into middle yellow maps. But beyond that, you're just not going to be interested in random rares because the things that matter are going to be either crafted items or maybe a tier 3, 4, or 5 unidentified rare. Alchemy Orbs can't compete with those. So what do you do with your Elks at this point? Well, you start using them on those magic maps that drop. You then obliterate the existing mods, add 4 onto them, and you're well on your way in order to craft a 6 mod map that you can then apply 3 tablets to. Now, let's get back to the questions related to towers and tablets, because there are some follow-up changes that come from this. As your tablets are now directly applied to your maps, you've got those 3 slots down in the bottom of the map opening window that replace the existing situation that you've got. You can now apply the content you desire to every single map that you run, assuming that you're able to keep a sufficient stockpile of tablets. However, the ceiling for the amount of content you can apply to a single map has been lowered. Overall, this results in a more streamlined and consistent experience, but in order to not have the ceiling come down too far, we've buffed the modifiers on some tablets. Generally, the modifiers are approximately 2 to 3 times as powerful. Here's a few examples. Collectors, this is rarity. 10 to 30% increased rarity, which is currently 7 to 10%. Teaming, this is the one that increases the number of magic monsters. This is going from 15 to 25% now, up to 25 to 70%. So this one's not quite tripled, this is closer to double and a half. Of strongboxes now has a 50 to 100% increased chance for your maps to contain strongboxes, up from 30 to 50%, so closer to a doubling in this case. And you can see here, we're looking anywhere from double to double and a half between these different mods. There's also going to be a number of new modifiers. Now, broadly speaking, this is not going to be a positive. Having all of these additional modifiers means you are less likely to get the really powerful ones, the quantity ones, the rarity ones, and the like. They're just simply going to show up less. So we have of the Devoted, +1 Shrine, of the Antiquarian, +1 Strongbox, Crystallized, +1 Essence, Exiled, +1 Rogue Exile, Asmiris, +1 Asmiri Spirit, Summoners, area contains an additional summoning circle, and of the summoning, area has 25 to 50% increased chance to contain a summoning circle. And a number of other things are being done with respect to tablets. I think we might get some more information on this when patch notes are dropped for 031, but that might not be for a little while. Unique tablets are going to have their own individual number of uses. When using tablets in the reforging bench, the resultant item that you get out of the reforge, so this is the reforging bench that you unlock from that Act 3 side quest where you go and fight that molten golem. The resultant item will have the sum of the input tablets as its remaining number of uses, but this will be absolutely hard capped at the original maximum value. So the idea here is that as well as potentially overriding existing bad tablets that you've rolled up, this will also be something where you've got a bunch of tablets that are low on uses. You can then merge them into a single one that has a lot more uses if you prefer. Now, very important quality of life thing. I hadn't thought of this, but obviously they have playtested this and they've realized this is a necessary quality of life thing. When it's in an inventory, like your personal one or a stash, the number of uses remaining on each tablet can be seen on the bottom right of its icon. Existing tablets that have already been applied to your atlas, they will remain and they will not lose any value due to these changes. So this means that after 031, there'll be a narrow window in which maps can be juiced beyond current limits, after which that's then going to expire as those tablets end up getting used up. There's a bit of a standardization of map size that's taking place. This is an interesting one because something Grinding Gear Games have gone back and forth on at various points in both Path of Exile 1 and Path of Exile 2. Is how different maps should be from each other. Way back in Path of Exile 1, we're talking somewhere around patch 2.4, the introduction of the Atlas of Worlds, they made a deliberate design decision, which was that maps that have really good layouts, really smooth layouts like Strand in Path of Exile 1, like Beach, that these would have fewer monsters present in them, at least fewer native monsters. The maps that have completely heinous original layouts, like the Ivory Temple map, or alternately, Shudder, the Cursed Crypt map. These maps are some of the worst layouts in the game, and they ended up getting more monsters to compensate for being so bad. At other points, they realized that certain map bosses were taking forever to kill, so Desert Spring, Lava Lake in Path of Exile 1, and those maps also gained a huge amount of additional loot-giving monsters in them as well. Path of Exile 1, that was a strategy that they went for, and then over time, they built up the number of monsters you could add to maps via other means, to the point that this difference didn't actually start to matter all that much. In Path of Exile 2, they tried something similar early on. There were a lot of complaints about certain maps, particularly Augury. Augury became a bit of a meme, but there were a number of other ones as well. Now, these maps took considerably longer than others to navigate or complete, so they're now having their size reduced as well. They had their monster density increased earlier, but now they're going back and they're also going to decrease the size of those maps. Augury, Bastille, Bloomingfield, Channel, Epitaph, Fortress, Grimhaven, Hidden Grotto, Oasis, Penitentiary, Rupture, Savannah, Slick, Vile City, and Wetlands are all getting this treatment. I am not seeing the word Mire there. I am hoping that the exclusion of the word Mire is a typo and that Mire map is the one that gets shrunk the most. Because if there's only one map that I could decrease the size of, if I was only allowed to do one, not 15 or so, it would be Mire. Mire is a horrible layout. Mire's layout stinks as much as the swamps that it's set in. Another really big change, and this one can't be overstated just how substantial this is what's being done with the completion objective for maps. Currently, the way that you path through maps on the Atlas, so if you just want to get from A to B, you're maybe rushing a tower at the moment, or maybe you're exploring looking for a citadel in the future, your objective is to go into a map and it is to eliminate every single rare monster in there. Now that requires you to hunt all the way around that map, looking for every single rare monster that's present. Now the reason Grinding Gear Games did this is they wanted map bosses to be significant when they spawn. What they're going to do now is change the completion objective of each map to defeating the map boss. However, there are going to be two different categories of map bosses. Powerful map bosses. These, I believe, are the ones that exist now. And then there'll be nerfed map bosses, which are going to be the ones that appear whenever you don't have one of these boss icons. So when you don't have a powerful map boss, your objective is going to be to go in there and kill a not very powerful map boss and get reasonably underwhelming loot from it. But when you do have one of these powerful map boss icons, maybe you have then gone and added that through the use of a Precursor tablet, then you will instead go into that map. The map boss will be quite tough. When you defeat it, you'll have completed the map and you'll also receive additional rewards. Now, powerful map bosses are going to be the one that will gate +1 to Waystone tier, so you're going to need to kill a number of these while you're progressing through the Atlas as well. Firstly, there is going to be extra content in every map. So you're going to be able to deterministically add some things. You can deterministically add shrines by various means. You can deterministically add in ritual encounters by various means, mostly through Precursor tablets. You can also deterministically add in map bosses through various means. But once you've added in all of the content you're going to add to a map, there's then going to be 1, 2, or 3 additional pieces of content that are added in. This part of the thing Jonathan's talked about where they wants there to be surprising events in every map. And that's what they're going for by adding this 1, 2, or 3 additional pieces of content. So for instance, you might deterministically set up your map contains a breach and a ritual and a powerful map boss. And then beyond that, the game might decide through RNG to give you an expedition encounter and also to give you an Asmiri Wisp encounter. These are things that will be added as RNG additional content. Now there's going to be some minor to moderate changes to Atlas trees. We don't have full details of these yet, but these are not intended to be things that transform the existing functionality. What they're going to do is be numbers tweaks that change things so that they work about the same strength as they do now. So for instance, one example that they call out here is Crystal Realm. Crystal Realm is a notable on the map boss tree, and previously it added an additional essence to areas that contain a map boss. Well, that was going to be something that would be extraordinarily powerful with these changes, and it's only going to apply now to areas that have a powerful map boss. Essentially, it's not exactly what it used to be, but it is the same power level that it used to be. You're going to get the same number of essences that you got, but it's just going to award them in a slightly different way. They're going to be doing a few changes along those lines, but it's going to be on a case-by-case basis, whether something applies to every single map boss, or whether it's going to be something that applies only to the powerful map bosses. Fit for a King, which is a notable on the Atlas passive tree that is 25% increase to rarity from bosses, that is going to apply to all map bosses, whether they be the powerful map bosses or whether they be the mundane ones. There's also going to be some other changes that are taking place around the Atlas tree as well, and these are just going to be to account for mechanical changes around the towers. This isn't intended as a rebalance. It probably will be in some corner cases. The idea here, though, is that they're going to keep about the same power level that they had before 031, but they're probably not going to get everything exactly right here. Now, I mentioned that Citadel hunting is going to be a bit better than it was before. Well, Citadels are having their spawn rate increased by 66%. And one of those things as a Trade League player, this is something that's both positive and negative. It's positive because you find more of something. It's also negative because when you do find something, it's worth less than it otherwise would be. How that ends up playing out in Trade League is going to be an open question, but if you're playing in solo self-found, this is definitely an improvement. This is going to mean that you'll have more access to the Arbiter of Ash fight, and both the normal Arbiter of Ash and the Uber version if you're looking to do that. There are 3 final things that are listed here, and they're actually all pretty significant, so they're all definitely worth being aware of. The first one of these is that there is going to be a massive nerf to one of the most intensely disliked map modifiers that exists in Path of Exile 2 at the moment. This is areas covered in chilled, shocking, or ignited ground. All these bad ground effects, the amount of bad ground that they put onto the map, is going to be subject to a nerf that would make a 0.1.0 Archmage builds shudder. They're going to be nerfed by 66% at high tier maps and by larger amounts than 66% at lower tier maps. So these ones are copying a huge nerf. There is nothing, however, that's mentioned about players being targeted by temporal chains regularly. This is another map mod that annoys a lot of people. There's nothing mentioned about that, but do hold that thought because there is the potential for it to be in the last cluster. After this, there were a number of bugs that were making certain map bosses easier than intended. Map boss difficulty was not applying to many multi-form bosses, so a few of the maps that had deadly map bosses on them, they're going to be more difficult as a result. So what's happening here is that there's a whole bunch of buffs where you can get a factor of 10 more health, or effective health at least, on certain map bosses, and that's only applying to one phase of a multi-phase fight. It was always pretty odd that the second and third phases of some of these bosses had 10 times less life than the first phase. This was an unintentional mistake. It's been fixed. Watch out. Alongside the changes mentioned above, the patch contains various improvements and fixes to a plethora of issues. Now, this is one of those catch-all things that means basically check back when the patch notes are released. I expect this will be next week, although knowing my luck, it's probably going to be released the instant that I upload this video, but we'll then have to break that down on this channel. All details will be covered in full patch notes, which we'll post as soon as we can. Stay tuned. Right, so at this point, this is where I would normally say, thanks for your time, may your Val Orbs have interesting results, go and have fun, and the like. I do, however, want to quickly mention something that I mentioned in one previous video, which is that I've been working on a side project. This is something that is not very far along, but I've set up a website for it, and I've also set up a new YouTube channel. Doesn't currently have anything on it, but I expect that will change shortly. Details down in the description below. It's only very lightly linked to Path of Exile in any way, in that it is a power fantasy of sorts, and that it has major fantasy elements, but this is the science fantasy lit RPG web serial that I'm going to start releasing shortly. So details on that down in the description below. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it there. May your Val Orbs have interesting results, and please don't use one on the Big Towers patch.